The garage smelled like motor oil and broken dreams when Aven's text arrived. I was underneath a 2018 Honda Civic, wrestling with a stubborn transmission bolt, when my phone buzzed against the concrete floor. The sound echoed through the empty bay like a warning bell. I need space, Hale. Going to Europe with Pierce and his friends for a month. Figure things out. Sienna's with you. That was it. 23 words to dismantle a marriage. I slid out from under the car, wiping grease from my hands with a rag that had seen better decades. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the tools scattered on my workbench. Outside, Cleveland's industrial district hummed with late-night traffic, but inside my garage, everything had gone quiet. Aven Trenwick, my wife of 4 years, mother to our 1-year-old daughter, successful architect at Camden & Associates, and apparently someone who thought abandoning her family for a European vacation with her ex-boyfriend was a reasonable response to whatever crisis she'd manufactured in her head. Pierce Eldro. I remembered him from Aven's college stories. Old money family, trust fund baby who dabbled in investments and spoke about chakras like they were stock portfolios. The kind of guy who wore expensive watches and called everyone brother without a trace of irony. I walked to the small office attached to my garage where Sienna slept in her portable crib. She looked peaceful. Tiny fists curled near her face, completely unaware that her mother had just abandoned her for Instagram-worthy adventures across the Atlantic. The apartment above the garage wasn't much, but it was ours. Or had been ours. Now it was just mine and Sienna's. The living room still held traces of Aven's presence. Architectural magazines stacked on the coffee table, her favorite coffee mug in the sink, a half-finished sketch of some downtown renovation project pinned to the refrigerator. I picked up my phone and stared at the message again. No explanation, no discussion, no consideration for what this meant for Sienna's routine, her daycare schedule, her pediatric appointments. Just a unilateral decision wrapped in therapeutic language about space and figuring things out. The smart thing would have been to call her, demand answers, maybe even beg her to come home. But I'd learned something during my 6 years in the Army before I started fixing cars for a living. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. Instead, I opened a new document on my laptop and started typing. Day 1. Aven departed for Europe with Pierce Eldro and Associates. Left via text message at 11:47 p.m. No prior discussion regarding childcare arrangements, financial responsibilities, or duration of absence. Sienna's schedule maintained as normal. If Aven wanted space, I'd give her all the space she could handle. But I'd also give her something else. Consequences. The next morning brought the familiar chaos of single parenting. Sienna woke at 5:30 a.m., demanding breakfast with the urgency of a tiny dictator. I heated her bottle while she practiced her lung capacity from the high chair, her dark hair sticking up in directions that defied physics. Your mama's on an adventure, sweetheart, I told her as she grabbed at my fingers. But don't worry, Daddy's got this figured out. Mrs. Keene from next door appeared at my kitchen window around 7 a.m., her gray hair in curlers and her expression full of barely contained curiosity. Hale, honey, I saw Aven leave last night with suitcases. Everything all right? She's traveling for work, I said, which wasn't technically a lie. Aven had always treated her relationship with Pierce like a full-time job. For how long? A month. Mrs. Keene's eyebrows climbed toward her hairline. A month? With the baby? The baby's staying with me. She nodded slowly, the way people do when they're filing information away for future gossip sessions. Well, if you need anything... I appreciate it, Mrs. Keene. After she left, I called Sunshine Daycare to adjust Sienna's schedule. The director, a patient woman named Carol, listened as I explained the situation. So, you'll be handling drop-off and pick-up for the next month? Indefinitely, I corrected. I want to establish a consistent routine. Of course. We'll update our records to reflect you as the primary contact. Primary contact. The phrase had a nice ring to it. Next, I called Dr. Martinez's office to schedule Sienna's upcoming checkup. When the receptionist asked about Aven's availability, I was ready. Mrs. Trenwick is traveling extensively for work. I'll be handling all appointments going forward. We'll need updated paperwork reflecting the change in primary caregiver status. I'll bring everything you need. By noon, I had contacted Sienna's pediatrician, the daycare, our insurance company, and the local WIC office. Each conversation followed the same pattern. Explain the situation, request updated documentation, establish myself as the primary caregiver. I wasn't being vindictive. I was being practical. If Aven wanted to abandon her responsibilities, someone had to step up. And if that someone happened to create a paper trail in the process, well, that was just good record keeping. My phone buzzed with a text from Elliot Braddock, my best friend since high school and former police officer turned security consultant. Heard through the grapevine Aven's out of town. You holding up okay? Define okay, I texted back. Beer tonight? I'll bring pizza. Can't. Got Sienna. I'll bring kid-friendly pizza. Elliot arrived at 6 p.m. with a large pepperoni pizza and a six-pack of beer. He took one look at my expression and set the beer aside. Talk to me. I handed him Aven's text message. He read it twice, his jaw tightening with each pass. She left you with a text message? Gets better. Check her Instagram. I showed him Aven's latest post, a photo of her and Pierce at what looked like a fancy airport lounge, both holding champagne glasses. The caption read, "Sometimes you have to step away from everything to find yourself. Grateful for this healing journey with amazing friends." Elliot's expression darkened. Healing journey? Apparently abandoning your family is therapeutic now. What are you going to do? I pulled out a manila folder from my kitchen drawer. Inside were copies of every document I'd filed that day. Daycare forms, medical records, insurance updates, and a detailed log of Aven's absence. I'm going to give her exactly what she asked for. Week 2 began with Sienna cutting her first tooth and me learning that teething babies don't care about their father's sleep schedule. I walked the apartment at 2 a.m., bouncing her gently while she gnawed on everything within reach, including my shirt collar. I know, sweetheart. Growing up is tough. My phone sat silent on the kitchen counter. No calls from Aven. No texts asking about Sienna's well-being. Just radio silence punctuated by increasingly elaborate social media posts from her European adventure. The latest photo showed Aven and Pierce at some ancient cathedral, both looking contemplative and spiritual. Pierce had his arm around her waist in a way that suggested their relationship had evolved beyond figuring things out. The comments were full of heart emojis and supportive messages from friends who apparently thought abandoning your infant daughter was a brave act of self-discovery. I screenshot the post and added it to my growing file. Tuesday morning brought an unexpected visitor. I was feeding Sienna breakfast when someone knocked on my door. Through the peephole, I saw a middle-aged woman in a professional blazer holding a clipboard. Mr. Trenwick? I'm Janet Morrison from Child Protective Services. I received a call expressing concern about your daughter's welfare. My stomach clenched, but I kept my voice steady. Of course. Please come in. Janet Morrison had the practiced eye of someone who'd seen every possible domestic situation. She scanned the apartment methodically. Clean kitchen, organized living space, Sienna's toys arranged in neat bins, medical and daycare information posted on the refrigerator. I understand your wife is currently out of the country? That's correct. She left for Europe 2 weeks ago. And you're caring for your daughter alone? I'm caring for my daughter, period. Alone is just the current circumstance. She made notes on her clipboard. May I see Sienna's room? I led her to the nursery, where Sienna's crib stood next to a changing table stocked with diapers, wipes, and clothes organized by size. A feeding schedule was taped to the wall next to growth charts and vaccination records. You're very organized, Janet observed. I was in the Army before I became a mechanic. Organization keeps things running smoothly. She spent 20 minutes reviewing my documentation, daycare enrollment, medical records, feeding schedules, developmental milestones. Everything was current, detailed, and properly filed. Mr. Trenwick, I have to ask, did you file a complaint about your wife's absence? No, ma'am. I haven't filed any complaints about anything. Someone called our office claiming that a child had been abandoned. I felt a chill of realization. Did they give a name? Anonymous tip. But based on what I see here, your daughter is clearly well cared for. You have excellent records, a stable environment, and she appears healthy and happy. After Janet left, I sat at my kitchen table staring at Sienna, who was happily destroying a teething biscuit in her high chair. Someone had called CPS on me. Someone wanted to make my life difficult, probably hoping I'd crack under pressure and beg Aven to come home. But they had made a crucial mistake. The social worker visit had created an official record of my competence as a primary caregiver. Instead of hurting me, they just handed me another piece of documentation. I opened my laptop and added Janet Morrison's visit to my log, including her observations about the stable environment and my organizational skills. Then I did something else. I researched temporary custody modifications in Ohio. The law was clear. When one parent abandoned the family home for an extended period without making arrangements for childcare, the remaining parent could petition for temporary primary custody. The process required documentation of abandonment, evidence of the child's well-being with the remaining parent, and proof that the absent parent had voluntarily extended their absence. I had all three. Wednesday brought a call from Camden and Associates. Aven's boss, Mr. Camden, sounded confused and slightly irritated. Hale, I'm trying to reach Aven about the Morrison project deadline. She was supposed to submit preliminary drawings this week, but I can't get hold of her. She's in Europe, I said. Didn't she clear the time off with you? A long pause. She requested 3 days for a family emergency. That was 2 weeks ago. I see. Well, she extended her trip. Indefinitely, from what I understand. Indefinitely? She has client obligations, project deadlines. You'd have to take that up with her, Mr. Camden. I'm just watching our daughter while she finds herself. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. After he hung up, I added his call to my documentation. Aven hadn't just abandoned her family, she'd abandoned her professional responsibilities too. That evening, Elliot stopped by with Chinese takeout and a grim expression. I did some checking on your boy Pierce, he said, settling into my kitchen chair. Interesting guy. Define interesting. Trust fund ran out about 3 years ago. He's been living off credit and charm ever since. Also, he's got 2 DUI arrests and a restraining order from an ex-girlfriend who accused him of financial manipulation. I looked up from feeding Sienna. Financial manipulation? Convinced her to invest her inheritance in one of his business ventures. Turned out to be a shell company. She lost everything, but couldn't prove intentional fraud. And Aven's traveling with this guy. Gets better. I checked flight records. Their tickets were purchased with a credit card registered to Aven's name. The pieces clicked into place. Pierce was broke, charming, and manipulative. Aven was successful, vulnerable, and looking for excitement. She wasn't just funding her own abandonment, she was funding his lifestyle. There's more, Elliot continued. I found their hotel in Prague, fancy place, presidential suite. Guess whose name is on the reservation? Aven's. And guess who posted about their amazing friends paying for everything? He showed me Pierce's Instagram account. Photo after photo of expensive meals, luxury accommodations, and cultural excursions, all tagged with grateful mentions of generous friends who make dreams possible. I screenshot everything and added it to my file. Then I made a decision that would change everything. Elliot, I need you to help me with something. Name it. I'm filing for temporary custody modification. But first, I want to make sure I have everything documented properly. He leaned back in his chair, studying my expression. You're not just keeping records, are you? You're building a case. I'm protecting my daughter's interests. And if that happens to leave Aven in a difficult position when she gets back, then maybe she should have thought about that before she left. By week 3, my file had grown into multiple folders organized by category. Abandonment documentation, financial records, social media evidence, and childcare logs. I'd become a one-man investigative unit, and every day brought new material. Aven's Instagram had become a masterclass in poor judgment. The latest post showed her and Pierce at some exclusive restaurant in Barcelona, both looking tanned and relaxed. The caption read, "Learning so much about myself on this journey. Sometimes you have to break patterns to find your authentic self." The comments were revealing. Her work colleagues expressed confusion about her extended absence. Her sister asked pointed questions about Sienna. But most telling were Pierce's friends, who posted comments like, "Thanks for making this trip possible, A," and "Your generosity knows no bounds." I screenshot everything and cross-referenced the dates with my childcare logs. While Aven was discovering her authentic self in European restaurants, I was documenting every diaper change, every feeding, every milestone. Sienna had started crawling during her mother's absence. I had video evidence of her first successful attempt, time-stamped and saved in triplicate. Thursday morning brought an unexpected call from Lana Corbin, Aven's best friend since college. We'd never been close, but she'd always been polite during family gatherings. "Hale, I need to talk to you about Aven." "What about her?" "Can we meet?" "There are things you need to know." We agreed to meet at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory. I dropped Sienna at daycare and drove through Cleveland's morning traffic, wondering what Lana wanted to discuss. I found her at a corner table, looking uncharacteristically serious. Lana had always been the responsible one in her friendship with Aven, the voice of reason when Aven's ambitions outpaced her common sense. "She's making a mistake," Lana said without preamble. "Which part? Abandoning her daughter or funding her ex-boyfriend's vacation?" Lana winced. "You know about the money?" "I know Pierce's credit cards are maxed out and Aven's paying for everything. It's worse than that." She pulled out her phone and showed me a series of text messages. She asked me to wire her $5,000 yesterday, said it was for unexpected expenses. I read through the conversation. Aven's texts were increasingly desperate, mentioning problems with her credit cards and needing cash to extend their stay. Did you send it? No. But Hale, there's something else. Pierce contacted me last month before this trip happened. My attention sharpened. What kind of contact? He wanted information about Aven's financial situation, asked about her job, her salary, whether she had savings. I thought it was weird, but Aven said they were just reconnecting as friends. The manipulation was more extensive than I'd realized. Pierce hadn't just convinced Aven to fund their European adventure, he'd researched her financial capacity beforehand. Why are you telling me this? Lana looked uncomfortable. Because Aven's my friend, but what she's doing is wrong. Sienna doesn't deserve this. And honestly, neither do you. I appreciate that. There's one more thing. Pierce has been posting in private groups about his investment opportunity with a successful architect. He's basically bragging about manipulating her into funding his lifestyle. She showed me screenshots from a private Facebook group where Pierce had posted about his brilliant strategy for securing financial backing from lonely career women looking for excitement. I felt something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't just abandonment or poor judgment. It was calculated exploitation, and my wife was the target. Lana, I need you to do something for me. What? Keep documenting everything. Every conversation, every request for money, every post Pierce makes about his strategy. Can you do that? She nodded. I've been doing it already. I had a feeling this would end badly. That afternoon, I visited the law office of Patricia Hendricks, a family attorney Elliot had recommended. Her office was in a converted Victorian house near the courthouse, professional but not intimidating. Mr. Trenwick, I've reviewed the documentation you sent. This is quite comprehensive. I believe in thorough record keeping. Your wife has been absent for 3 weeks with no established return date, correct? Correct. Her original plan was 1 month, but she's indicated the trip might extend indefinitely. And you have evidence that she's voluntarily extended her absence? I showed her Aven's social media posts, the hotel reservations extending beyond the original month, and text messages where she mentioned staying as long as it takes to find clarity. Mr. Trenwick, based on this documentation, you have grounds for a temporary custody modification. The abandonment period, combined with your established role as primary caregiver, creates a strong case. What's the process? We file a motion with the family court requesting temporary primary custody based on abandonment. Given your documentation and the social worker's positive assessment, I expect the court will grant an emergency hearing. How long does that take? Emergency hearings can be scheduled within 48 hours if we can demonstrate immediate need. What constitutes immediate need? Patricia smiled grimly. A mother who's been absent for 3 weeks and just posted on social media about extending her European vacation indefinitely while her infant daughter remains in Ohio. I authorized her to proceed with the filing. That evening, I sat in Sienna's nursery watching her sleep. She looked peaceful, completely unaware of the legal machinery now grinding into motion. Tomorrow, Patricia would file the motion. Within 48 hours, we'd have a court date. And by the time Aven decided to return from her journey of self-discovery, she'd find that actions have consequences. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Pierce. We need to talk. I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Whatever Pierce wanted to discuss could wait. I had more important things to focus on, like preparing for the hearing that would determine my daughter's future. A Friday morning arrived with unusual clarity. I dropped Sienna at daycare, kissed her forehead, and drove to the courthouse with a manila envelope containing 3 weeks of meticulous documentation. Patricia met me in the lobby, looking confident in her navy suit. The motion was filed yesterday evening. Judge Martinez agreed to an emergency hearing this afternoon at 2 p.m. That fast? When one parent abandons an infant for weeks with no established return date, family courts take it seriously. The hearing was held in a small courtroom that smelled of old wood and legal precedent. Judge Martinez was a stern-looking woman in her 50s who reviewed my documentation with the methodical attention of someone who'd seen every possible family crisis. Mr. Trenwick, your wife has been absent for how long? 3 weeks and 2 days, Your Honor. And her original plan was? 1 month for personal travel. She since indicated the absence may extend indefinitely. Judge Martinez reviewed Aven's social media posts, the hotel reservations, and my childcare documentation. Her expression remained neutral, but I caught her eyebrows rise slightly when she reached Pierce's posts about his investment opportunity. Mr. Trenwick, you've maintained sole care of your daughter during this period? Yes, Your Honor. I've documented every aspect of her care, including medical appointments, daycare schedules, and developmental milestones. I see that Child Protective Services conducted a welfare check. Their assessment was positive? Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Morrison noted a stable environment and excellent record keeping. Judge Martinez set down the papers and looked at me directly. Mr. Trenwick, what are you requesting from this court? Temporary primary custody of my daughter, pending my wife's return and a full evaluation of the situation. And if your wife returns before the temporary order expires, then we can address the situation through proper legal channels with appropriate consideration for our daughter's well-being and stability. Judge Martinez spent 10 minutes reviewing the evidence. When she looked up, her decision was clear. Based on the evidence presented, I'm granting temporary primary custody to Mr. Trenwick. Mrs. Trenwick will be entitled to supervised visitation upon her return, pending a full custody evaluation. This order takes effect immediately and remains in force until modified by this court. Patricia squeezed my shoulder as we left the courthouse. Congratulations. You now have legal primary custody of Sienna. The weight of it hit me as I drove home. I wasn't just Sienna's caretaker anymore. I was her legal guardian. Aven's European adventure had just become significantly more complicated. That evening, I received a flurry of angry text messages from an international number. What did you do? Lana told me you filed something with the court. You can't just take my daughter away from me. I'm coming home immediately. I responded with a single message. The court documents will explain everything. Safe travels. Then I blocked the number. Saturday brought a call from Mr. Camden at Aven's architecture firm. Hale, I'm sorry to bother you, but Aven missed another major deadline. The Morrison project is in jeopardy, and frankly, I'm considering termination proceedings. That's between you and Aven, Mr. Camden. The problem is, I can't reach her. Her phone goes to voicemail, and her last email was 2 weeks ago. She's been traveling extensively. For 3 weeks? Without communication? Hale, I have to ask. Is everything all right at home? I chose my words carefully. Aven decided she needed space to figure some things out. She left for Europe and hasn't provided a clear timeline for her return. A long pause. She left you alone with the baby? I'm managing fine. Jesus, Hale, I'm sorry. I had no idea. Like I said, that's between you and Aven. After he hung up, I realized Aven's professional life was crumbling along with her personal life. Her absence hadn't just affected our family, it had created a cascade of consequences she apparently hadn't considered. Sunday afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. I was playing with Sienna in the living room when someone pounded on my door. Through the peephole, I saw a tall man in an expensive jacket looking agitated. Pierce Eldro. In person, he was exactly what I'd expected. Perfectly styled hair, designer clothes, and the kind of artificial confidence that comes from never facing real consequences. I opened the door, but didn't invite him in. You must be Hale. And you must be the reason my wife abandoned her daughter. His practiced charm faltered slightly. Look, we need to talk. This whole situation has gotten out of hand. Which situation? The abandonment, the financial manipulation, or the legal consequences? Aven's on her way back. She's upset about this court thing, but we can work it out. We? I care about Aven. I want what's best for her. What's best for her would have been staying home with her daughter instead of funding your European vacation. Pierce's mask slipped completely. You don't understand the situation. I understand it perfectly. You researched Aven's finances, manipulated her into funding your lifestyle, and convinced her that abandoning her family was some kind of spiritual journey. That's not... How did you... I have excellent documentation skills. Pierce stepped closer, trying to intimidate me. You can't keep Aven from her daughter. I'm not keeping anyone from anything. The court made a decision based on the evidence. If Aven wants to change that, she'll need to demonstrate that she's capable of putting Sienna's needs before her own desires. This isn't over. You're right, it's not. But it's also not your decision anymore. I closed the door and locked it, then watched through the window as Pierce stood on my porch for several minutes, apparently trying to process that his charm offensive had failed completely. That evening, I updated my documentation with details of Pierce's visit, including his attempt at intimidation and his assumption that he had any say in my family's affairs. Tomorrow, Aven would return to find that her month of self-discovery had cost her everything she'd taken for granted. Her marriage, her daughter, her job, and her carefully constructed life had all crumbled while she posed for Instagram photos with her manipulative ex-boyfriend. I felt no satisfaction in her downfall, only a grim determination to protect Sienna from the chaos Aven had created. The legal machinery was now in motion, and all the European adventures in the world couldn't change the fact that actions have consequences. The only question now was whether Aven would learn from those consequences or continue down the path of self-destruction she'd chosen. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, matching my mood as I prepared for Aven's return. I'd received a text from Lana confirming that Aven had caught a red-eye flight from Barcelona and would arrive at Cleveland Hopkins around noon. Pierce, apparently, had decided to extend his European adventure indefinitely rather than face the consequences of his manipulation. I dropped Sienna at daycare as usual, maintaining the routine that had become our new normal. Carol, the daycare director, noticed my tension. "Everything all right, Hale?" "My wife's returning today. There might be some complications. We have your custody documentation on file. No one else is authorized for pickup." "I appreciate that." I spent the morning at the garage trying to focus on an engine rebuild, but my mind kept drifting to the confrontation ahead. Aven would be angry, defensive, and probably armed with justifications for her behavior, but she'd also be returning to a reality she no longer controlled. At 11:30, I closed the garage and drove home. I wanted to be there when she arrived, to see her face when she realized the full extent of what she'd lost. I didn't have to wait long. At 12:45, a taxi pulled up outside our building. Aven emerged, looking tanned and tired, her designer luggage a stark contrast to the industrial neighborhood she'd once called home. She paid the driver and stood on the sidewalk for a moment, staring up at the apartment like she was seeing it for the first time. I watched from the kitchen window as she climbed the stairs, her key scraping against the lock like she'd forgotten how it worked. When she finally opened the door, I was sitting at the kitchen table with a folder in front of me. "Hello, Aven." She looked different. The European sun had given her a glow that made her seem younger, but there was something hollow in her eyes, like she'd lost something essential during her journey of self-discovery. "Where's Sienna?" "Daycare. She has a schedule now." Aven dropped her luggage and looked around the apartment. Everything was clean, organized, and functioning perfectly without her. The refrigerator held Sienna's feeding schedule, developmental charts, and medical information. Her architectural magazines had been replaced with parenting resources and legal documents. "We need to talk," she said. "Yes, we do." She sat across from me, and I slid the folder across the table. Inside was a copy of the court order granting me temporary primary custody, along with documentation of her 3-week absence. Aven read through the papers twice, her face growing paler with each page. "You filed for custody?" "I filed for temporary custody modification based on abandonment. I didn't abandon anyone. I needed space to think." "You left for Europe with your ex-boyfriend, funded his vacation with your credit cards, and extended your absence indefinitely. What would you call that?" "It wasn't like that." "Then explain what it was like." Aven struggled for words, her carefully rehearsed justifications crumbling under the weight of documented evidence. Pierce needed help getting back on his feet. He had an opportunity in Europe, but needed financial backing. "So you abandoned your daughter to fund your ex-boyfriend's business venture?" I thought it would be temporary." 3 weeks is temporary?" "I was going to come back." "When?" Silence. I pulled out my phone and showed her Pierce's social media posts about his investment opportunity and his strategy for manipulating lonely career women. "He played you, Aven, from the beginning. He researched your finances, identified your vulnerabilities, and convinced you that abandoning your family was some kind of spiritual awakening." Aven stared at the posts, her face crumpling as she realized the extent of Pierce's deception. "He said he loved me. He loved your credit limit. I can fix this. I'll talk to the court, explain the situation." "The court has already made its decision based on the evidence." "What evidence?" I opened a second folder containing 3 weeks of documentation, childcare logs, medical records, social media screenshots, financial records, and witness statements. Every day you were gone, every post you made, every dollar you spent on Pierce's vacation, it's all documented. Aven flipped through the pages, her expression shifting from anger to disbelief to something approaching horror. "You were planning this." "I was protecting my daughter." Our daughter. Our daughter who you abandoned for Instagram photos with your ex-boyfriend." Aven's composure finally cracked. "I made a mistake, all right? I was confused, overwhelmed, and Pierce made everything seem possible. But I'm back now. I want to fix this." "It's not that simple." "Why not?" "Because actions have consequences. You lost your job while you were gone. Camden fired you for missing deadlines and abandoning client responsibilities." Her face went white. "He can't do that." "He already did. Your professional reputation is destroyed, your personal relationships are damaged, and your daughter doesn't know who you are anymore." "That's not true." When's the last time you asked about Sienna's well-being? When's the last time you called to check on her development, her health, her happiness? Silence. She started crawling while you were gone. Her first tooth came in. She learned to say, Dada. You missed everything because you were too busy funding Pierce's European adventure. Aven buried her face in her hands. I can't lose her. You already did. The question now is whether you can earn her back. What do you want from me? I want you to understand that being a parent means putting your child's needs before your own desires. I want you to recognize that you can't just abandon your responsibilities whenever life gets complicated. And then? Then we'll see if you're capable of change. Aven looked around the apartment again, seeing it now as an outsider. Everything functioned perfectly without her. Sienna was thriving. I was managing both parenthood and work, and the life she'd abandoned had continued and improved in her absence. Can I see her? Supervised visits. That's what the court ordered. Supervised by who? Social services, until you demonstrate that you're capable of putting Sienna's needs first. The reality hit her like a physical blow. She wasn't coming home to resume her old life. She was returning as a visitor in her own family. I'm sorry, she whispered. Sorry doesn't change what happened. Sorry doesn't give Sienna back the 3 weeks you missed. Sorry doesn't restore the trust you destroyed. Then what will? Time, consistency, proof that you've learned from this experience. Aven sat in silence, staring at the court documents that had redefined her relationship with her own daughter. Outside, the afternoon was growing dark, and soon I'd need to pick up Sienna from daycare. The routine would continue, stable and predictable, while Aven figured out how to rebuild a life she'd carelessly thrown away. Where will I stay? That's your decision to make. This is my home, too. The court order gives me primary custody and control of the family residence. You're welcome to visit during designated hours, but you can't live here until the custody arrangement is resolved. The final piece of her old reality crumbled. She had no job, no home, no custody of her daughter, and no one to blame but herself. Pierce had vanished back to whatever European adventure he could afford without her credit cards, leaving her to face the consequences alone. No, this can't be, she whispered, staring at the court documents. But it could be, and it was. The space she'd needed had become a chasm she couldn't cross, and the life she'd abandoned had moved on without her. I stood up and grabbed my keys. I need to pick up Sienna. You can see her for 1 hour, supervised by me, then you need to leave. As I walked toward the door, I heard Aven sobbing behind me, but I didn't turn around. Some lessons can only be learned the hard way, and Aven's education was just beginning. The calendar had decided the rest, just as I'd promised it would.